my name is Andrew. I'm a customer success engineer. I'm here. My role is to provide training, share best practices, um, provide information. So we have this office hours so that we can deep dive in questions that you might have about how to get things accomplished using Hostaway and how to get things accomplished also on the channels that you're connected, right? How to increase your sales, how to get more reservations. And we are here to share more best practices, all right? And we have articles, we have many different ways, to support you. We have our own support, we have CSMs that can assist you with that. And this time, we select at least 1 hour here, to go over a topic. Today we are going to be talking about Vrbo, and we are here to answer any kind of questions, right? So, but of course, some topics they have so many questions, and Vrbo is one of them. That people are interested on specifics that if we have time, we cover different questions, right? Unrelated to the main topic, but in respect to everyone that showed up, to see that specific topic, we try to stick to the topic, right? Unless we cover all the questions, and then of course it will be a pleasure, to go over all that. All right. So now it's being recorded, so you don't have to ask, you don't have to take notes if you don't want to. You can review it later because tomorrow you will receive a link, to watch the webinar again. Or in case next time you're not able to attend, you can always register and get the link, right? And there is another way of seeing that. You can see it from the user guide, and I can show you. And I also shared the link, to the user guide where you can watch not only the latest webinar, the latest office hours, but also, the previous ones, right? In case you're interested. So this is a practical session, right? So this is it's your time. So I strongly encourage you to post your questions, to bring any concerns or any doubt that you have, on how to get things done. And I'll be glad to address that or to reach out and get an answer later on, right? If I don't know, or maybe it could be something new, right? So let's get started. All right. And by the way, thank you. Thank you very much for being here, and spending some time that property managers usually don't have much time, yeah. And I know I really appreciate you taking the time to learn a little more. So let's start with new listing promotion, right? So many of my clients, they ask me, okay, if my listing is brand new, right, how can I get the first reviews, right? Because everybody knows that once you get traction, with a listing, you're going to get reviews, right? And the reviews are the main driver for the next reviews, right? Because then any guest looking for a place to stay, they see the reviews and then they stay. But how to get traction if you just created a listing, right? Maybe you were not listing on Vrbo, uh, and then you created a listing. Maybe you were just connected to another channel, right? And then you connect to a channel manager exactly because you want to explore different ones. So then I always recommend new listing promotion, right? And why is that? Because it first of all, it becomes clear to the guest that you don't have reviews because it is a new listing, right? So it's not because it is a listing that nobody wants to book, because you have to see from the guest perspective, if it doesn't have a review, should I stay at that place? But if it is promoted as being new, okay, that's a reason why, right? So you're just joining the channel. So it gives a boost on your position on the search ranking, right? So that's another important reason to have. You get a new listing badge, so it becomes very transparent, why you're being there without any reviews, and it will overcome, that initial challenge, right? That is getting the first reviews while you don't have any, to begin with, right? So, and key benefits like the visibility, right? Build early momentum. So you just started. You don't want to wait until someone, decides that, okay, let me test this property, right? So it's a way to expedite, that beginning and get traction, quickly. Uh, and attract guests that are interested. Okay, I want to be the first one. So I strongly recommend. You can find that when you are exporting listings, connecting listings to export, you see this pop-up before you click on export, and then you can check that box, right? So this is how you get the new listing promotion, right? So it's something that is strongly recommended, right? So if you talk to any account manager at Vrbo, they will recommend you as well, right? So don't miss it. I'm going to go over, quickly here. I can see some questions already popping up. Uh, but before I go to the questions, right, I'm going to go quickly over some content here that we have just to be a conversation starter, right? So then we can go back and spend some time on the dashboard and over the questions. All right. I'll be I'll be answering soon. So is instant booking available, right? So I get some clients that are reluctant, at the beginning because they want to screen which kind of gas they're willing to accept. So if you want to scale up, right, on the number of reservations that you're getting, right, instant booking is one of the ways, right? Because many guests are not willing to ask if there is availability, if they can stay at your place, before booking something, right? So if you have a very high occupancy, okay, that's fine. But if you don't have it, right? If you don't have instant booking, chances are that you're going to lose sales, right? You're leaving money on the table on that regard. So I strongly recommend you to review, that strategy because it will make a difference. It's an e-commerce kind of rule, right? So it's not even exclusively, about short-term rental, right? Every time you go to any e-commerce website, you want to purchase something, you just want to click and buy, right? So you don't want to ask questions until you decide if you want to buy. You may put it on your cart, but you might forget your cart, right? So, and especially on a channel, as big as Vrbo, you can only imagine that people may book another property, right? So if yours is not open to instant booking, amenities, right? So that is another very common mistake that I see, many property managers doing, right? So they take excellent pictures, of the properties with everything they have, but then they miss looking into the channel and finding, okay, let me check box by box and making sure, that I get everything covered, right? And the other way around, there could be some amenities that you're not offering that you could, right? That don't cost much. And you could have it to make sure that your listing is more appealing, right? So if if I will show you in a minute, what I'm talking about, because we have hundreds of amenities, right? And if you miss that, it will be missed by the guest, right? So remember, when we are talking about the specific channels, right? Like Vrbo, for example, that in this case, the guest is coming from Vrbo website, right? From Vrbo app. And they're looking and they're screening. And guests, they have different ways of searching for your property, right? Some of the guests will look for the photos, some of the guests will look for an address, for a region. And some of them will filter based on amenities, right? So if they have to decide between two properties, very likely the final decision will be between the ones that offer more amenities, right? So if it is a similar price, similar place, similar kind of house, it could come down to that. And it could be that you have the amenity, and you took care of that, right? So you bought it, you spent some money, invested, but if you forget to check that box on the software, right? What's going to happen? When the information is pushed to the channel, that will not show up on the other side, right? So if a guest, let's say, for example, we are talking about a barbecue, right? So if you don't have it checked on the dashboard, this information is not pushed. So if you have a guest that is interested on filtering, based on the fact that if you have a barbecue or not, they're not going to find your property, right? So that's why it's that relevant. Okay. Nearby location, right? That's another big one because people are booking your place based on the location, right? They're very likely, going to your property because I don't know, you're close to museums, downtown, mountains, right? So this is what is bringing value, to your listing or to your guest. And again, right, you invested money on that, you might as well take the benefit of it, right? So if you don't check boxes again, right, it's not every guest will look for a map, right? They will filter information many times, right? So make sure that you verify that. I'm going to spend some time on the dashboard as well. Photos, again, right? So statistically, right? So you're more likely to get a reservation if you have at least 30 photos, right? And why is that? Because many guests, they want to get the feeling, on how it's like to be at that place, right? So I get some property managers saying, yeah, but I have a photo of each room from the living room, and from the facade. Yeah, that's not enough. Maybe it was in the past, right? But that's not enough. So the guest wants to see, okay, different angles, right? To see, okay, I want to have an understanding on how big is the room or how close is the bathroom from the room. Right? Is the bathroom clean? So it might not be your favorite photo, but many guests, they only book a place after they see a picture of the bathroom, right? Because they want to make sure that they're taking their family to a clean place, right? So different angles. Activities, if you have activities, take photos of the activities, right? Because this is also one of the selling propositions that you're bringing, right? So why is the guest going to your property? Because they want maybe to swim, on the beach, on a lake, or something like that. So try to take photos, of activities that they're going to do around, the vibe of the place, the decoration, uh, any natural scene, that is beautiful to watch. So ideally, for Vrbo specifically, you would have at least 50 photos, right? That's the ideal. That would be a complete property, from the algorithm perspective, right? But you should have at least 30, right? But I would go for 50 photos because you see you perform better, on that channel. Okay. And of course, high quality photos, right? When I say high quality, is not only the definition of the photo, but have a professional taking photos, right? So you don't want to uh, spoil that, with a bad photo, right? So you invested so much on everything and you want it to be appealing, right? So reason to have a good photographer updating that, right? Cancellation policy, right? That's another big one. It's again, if you have a high occupancy, everything that I'm saying here is especially relevant, right? If your occupancy is not high, this could be one of the reasons for that, right? And many of you, if you have a very, very high occupancy, maybe, you can oversee, some of these items here because, all right, maybe you don't need to, right? But cancellation policy, it's very common for new property managers to be super strict, right, on the cancellation policy because they're afraid that if the guest cancels into the future, right, so then they lost the sale. So, but you have to think a little bit before, right? So put yourself on the guest shoes again, right? And think like, would you book a super strict property, if you want to book your vacation? Uh, it is it is very common, to have guests that only book like flexible cancellations, right? So they don't even go for a non-refundable, for example, or a very strict cancellation policy because they're afraid that they might have to change their plans, right? So you're losing sales now, right? So if you're concerned about having to refund a guest in the future, right, because they might cancel, just check how many cancellations you have, see the proportion of that of the total amount of bookings that you have, and you see, because on average it's not as high as many people think, when they're putting together their cancellation policies, right? Sometimes you are overestimating, how many cancellations you have and underestimating the amount of reservations that you might get if you have a more flexible cancellation policy, right? That's another common thing that I discuss a lot with property managers. All right. Payment schedule, right? Another thing, right? So if, let's say, for example, COVID time, right, especially in North America, you know, there was a huge demand, to get a place to stay, with a family, and there was a very high demand, and not too many properties available, to be booked. So it was common to onboard clients that were using 100% at the moment of the reservation, right? Is that a common thing? Not anymore, right? Again, depends on the market, depends on your competition that you have, Uh, and why is that? Because again, many guests, the same way that they want flexibility, if they need to cancel, they want to be sure, that they can cancel uh, in between now and a couple of months ahead. Even the booking window, as you know, has been shrinking, right? So people are booking closer and closer to the time that they want to stay, right? So if you charge 100% at the time of the reservation creation, what is going to happen? The only ones that are going to book with you are the ones that already have the money right now, right? If you're more flexible, let's say 50% now, 50% closer to the check-in time, then you're attracting also guests that have part of the money now, but don't have all the money, to complete the reservation, but we'll have, between now and the check-in date, right? So again, this is also a factor that is important to take into consideration. Uh, Reviews, right? Reviewing the guests to get more reviews. Yes. So I'm not even talking about getting reviews because, of course, everyone here, on this office hour is aware that review will have a huge impact on your sales, right? So we can spend like an entire hour just talking about reviews here, right? But one of the features that we have on automatically reviewing the guest is specifically, I still see, some of the property managers that I help missing that, right? I'm afraid that I can show you. I'm afraid of reviewing a guest that had a bad experience. I can show you how to stop that, in the process. But it is important to review the guest, right? Especially on the channels that allow you to review the guest. Not every channel allows. Vrbo and Airbnb, they allow you to review the guest. So that's an important one. And why is that? Because it reminds the guest to review you, right? And you want to get more reviews. And of course, the assumption is you're already delivering a great work, right? A great experience to the guests. So you might as well get the reviews, and increase your score, right? The more reviews you have, you know how it works, right? All right. So as I said, I don't like to spend too much time in theory. It was more just like a guide, so that we can go to the dashboard, right? So I have I have here a test account. Yeah, don't be surprised, right? So you can see some overbook is here, but this is a test account, right? That we create, we force situations here. So that's why you're seeing this kind of thing. All right. Just let me go over the questions now. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for the question, Lucas. Nice seeing you here again. Uh, Asking me about Vrbo in Brazil, specifically in Brazil. I can look for data on that, right? So how is it performing? But is a very specific case. I can look for additional information for you on that and get back to you, right? On how is it performing. All right. But this is a very specific one. I'll look for some others. But I'll get back to you on that one. And by the way, when you ask me about getting traction in countries, it's not only about countries, right? For example, depending on the tier, on the type of listing that you're promoting, might perform better in a channel than a different one, right? So the geographic location of the property, of course, it will count a lot. It will count, of course, the country, but also the micro region, that you're competing with, might make a difference, right? Also, the type of listing might make a difference, right? So if you have a low end or a high end listing, it will make a difference, right? So there are many factors, to be taken into consideration, before I'm able to answer that question. But I'll talk to you, we can go over that. Okay, very, very good question here, about location, right? So we are not beachfront, but should we select beach location? All right. So let me go here. Okay, this one. All right. Many of the things that I'm describing, it is related to the listing, right? So let's go to this listing here, for example. Um, let's go to amenities. Okay, photos, right? You all know is here, in media. And then let's talk amenities, right? So on location, right? So the question about location. If you're in a beach region, I would select beach, right? If you're in a beachfront, that's a different story, right? But if one of the reasons why someone is going to your place is because of the beach, I would select beach, right? So this is something that, yeah, one thing is a beach view, the other one is beachfront, right? So they're different ones, So when you're seeing beach, you're saying that you're nearby, you're in an area, that is near the beach, right? You're not saying that is by the beach, right? It's not doesn't have a beach view or a beachfront. So in this case, yes, you can say that you're on the beach, right? And by the way, location, on there. So I'm inside amenities, and inside amenities, amenities location. This one is extremely important, right? Because this is one of the main filters that is a favorite on Vrbo, right? So you see that filter in many times being one of the most important ones, right? Because it's like, and you can see it could be city view, right? It could be Gulf. There are many natural landmarks, that we could be talking about, ocean, resort. river, it could be town, right? It could be downtown. So look into that and make sure that you select that, right? So there are many, like I mentioned, right? We have hundreds of them, right? So some of them that I described, were attractions, on the presentation. And as you can see, Vrbo has many of them, right? Many of the other channels don't even have, this many amenities mapped, but Vrbo does. So if you connected your listing to Hostaway, just imported from Airbnb, right? Yes, all the fields that you had mapped to Airbnb, they were imported into Hostaway, but not necessarily they are the same, that are available on Vrbo, right? And that works with any channel, right? As a channel manager, we integrate with any field available in the channel API, right? Which is the software interface. And they work in different ways, right? So some of them they have more things, different names, and different endpoints, right? So that's why I don't have other channels here because they are the only one offering here, right? So just saying that you might have missed, right? So if you're a newcomer here to Hostaway, and you just imported your listing, from Airbnb, which is the majority of the cases, here at Hostaway, our clients already have an Airbnb account with listings. As you can see, many fields here could be missing, any information just because they're only connected to Vrbo, right? They're only available for Vrbo. They're not available for other channels, right? Of course, many of them are available in different channels, and that's okay. But some of them are specific, to some channels, right? You can see some of them more than one, right? So this is uh, this is what I was telling you about. That sometimes we see on the photos many of these amenities here. But then when we come here, it's the box is not checked, right? So what happens in this case, you miss sales, right? Because someone is filtering the reservation, the listings on Vrbo, and they're not seeing it, right? Because they're using the filter. So if you don't have any sort of a checkbox, right? It's going to be a yes or no, right? So it's your listing will not appear, right? As simple as that. So I recommend that you review your amenities at least once a month, right? I would put a schedule, I would put on my calendar, a way to keep coming back and reviewing if you're not missing anything, right? The reason for that is because simply as missing sales, right? Because you're not appearing on any search that needs that, right? So pay attention to that and come back. All right. Okay, got another question, but what if I have a ski nearby? Okay, so I would put, yeah, but not on your property, right? It's nearby, but not on your property because you don't have the equipment. In that case, I would put on the description, right? Because if you put on the box, uh, you might mislead the guest, right? So yeah, that's kind of a gray area here, right? So if you don't have the property, because if you check the box, people will expect, some of the things, especially if we are talking about leisure, right? What are you offering? Or at least do the other way around, right? If it is close enough that you believe, okay, I can offer that and say that it's close by. So put the disclaimer on your description, right? Check the box and add the disclaimer on the description. Okay. So just to make sure that you don't get a bad review, for example, because someone uh a guest found that he was misled, to believe that you had that on your property, you know, and wouldn't have to pay extra for that, for example, right? That's a common situation because if it is, or another option that you can have is uh, add as an upsell, right? So you can create an upsell here, and sell that as a separate thing, because then it becomes very clear. You can also make some money out of it, right? And then you can negotiate a better price with a local provider, right? That way, yes, you're offering, but is upon payment, right? So that's another thing that you can do on amenities. You can describe, right, when it is for Vrbo, for example. Let's say, for example, if I select uh, voting here. You see, you can add a description, right? So you can put it here upon request, right, or nearby, or things like that, right? Just make sure that the information is clear, so that you don't create an expectation that cannot be matched, right? And then I would add that as an upsell, right? That's an opportunity for you, to sell that. It's not yours. You don't have the equipment. Maybe it's too expensive. You don't think it's worth it to buy that and have it at your property. You'll not be able to increase, because there is always, the trade-off, right? So maybe you can increase your nightly rate if you had a canoe, for example, right? Or maybe not. Maybe you can just sell, that separately, the use of a canoe. And if you don't want to buy it, just make a partnership, with someone nearby, and you sell it, and then you get it. You can even automate the task for that, right? So to communicate. Very good question. Thanks. Okay. Uh, Now going back to payments, right? So we discussed amenities. Let me go to payment, duplicate that. And so we keep coming back, right? Guest payment. So when we create a payment, uh, this is one example, that I described, that is a very common one, right? So 50% at the moment of the reservation, which for the dashboard is reservation creation, and 50% 30 days before check-in, right? Very common one. Uh, and then what I described was, okay, in the past, some people used to come here and say, no, I want 100% here at the moment of the reservation creation, right? It is less and less common. It is, yeah, I still have clients that do that, right? Because sometimes they have a listing where nobody else has it, right? So, or it's a very disputed place, everybody wants to stay. So in that case, yes, of course, right? So you can charge everything up front, right? So you can have strict cancellation policies, and many of the things that I'm saying here, might not apply, right? But in general, right? The question here from Danielle is, can I charge the guest without charging anything upfront? Yes, you can remove that, right? So you can say that you're only going to charge, like, I don't know, 10 days after the reservation creation, or you can use the check-in and count back, number of days, right? So yeah, you can, right? So this is the event, right? Reservation creation or check-in or check-out, even check-out you can use. For payment doesn't make, too much sense to use checkout as a reference, but check-in and reservation creation are usually, the reference, right? The event reference. And then you select days at or days after or before, right? So yes, to answer your question, yes, you can a way to set up payment so Hostaway it doesn't charge by credit card immediately. Yes. So how does it work, right? Just a refresher here on how the payment works with Vrbo. Transfer the credit card, the guest credit card, and Hostaway system will collect the credit card and store inside your Stripe account, right? So it is stored at the moment that the reservation was created. The credit card was collected and it was stored in your account. So it is available after that moment to be charged at any time, right? So it doesn't have to be necessarily at the reservation creation, right? So that's more like the concept of deposit, right? Every time someone books something, I want to deposit right away just to make sure that you're not going to cancel. But technically, what you're asking is possible, right? And you can even split, and it doesn't have to be related to the reservation creation. Thanks for the question. Okay, Katya is asking, where can I see the option of 50% now, 50% later active on my end? Okay, so you go to guest payment here on your dashboard and select auto payment, right? So this is how you set up the instruction, right? And then you can also see on the reservation the payment that was charged or it is scheduled. It will show as due, right? So, but if you're talking about the rule or how to modify the rule, how to implement the rule, you just come here on gas payments and auto payments. And of course, you may have different rules per channel and per listings, right? So you can set up that in different ways. All right. And by the way, so let me share this, for those of you new. This I try to answer questions that applies to most of you, right? But some of you might have very specific questions that only opening your dashboard, someone can assist you, right? And I don't open, those of you that are here, with us for more time, I don't open the dashboard because for privacy concerns, I don't share other clients' data, right? For confidentiality. So you may need someone to sit down with you. If that's the case, just I'm sharing here a form so that I can get someone to assist you. If I'm not able to join you on the call, I can get someone to schedule a call with you and go over your dashboard and review, right? If you're still in onboarding, you can ask your onboarding specialist, right? That happens sometime that you're asking me questions that is still will be covered by the onboarding specialist, right? But if that's not the case, if you have already been onboarded, but maybe you don't remember or someone else from your team was onboarded and now you're managing something, yes, please, go over this form here, provide me your email, your account ID, and your name, and the reason why you're reaching out, right? So that we can have a specialist assisting with that. So you can always go here. If you don't remember your account ID, it's here. This is the email of the account, right, that you can provide just to make it easier for our team to find you, right? So because when you joined Zoom, maybe you provided the email that you use with Hostaway, maybe not, right? So if you don't help me with that, my team will not be able to reach out to you. All right, please do it now. And thanks for the question, right? So again, Katja, I hope I answered your question, but if that's what you're looking for, I believe I answered. But if you need assistance with that, especially payments, right? It's not something that you are more or less confident about it, right? So you have to be 100% confident on that, right? So please use it. Make sure that you use our resources that we have available here, to review your setup, right? Okay. Now Mark is asking, for a listing that is already on Airbnb, is it better to export that listing to Vrbo rather than creating a listing in Vrbo and then import it? Yes. I'm sorry. No, no, no. So let me go over here the process, right? Again, Mark, you can have some of our agents to assist you with that, right? But long story short, right? So if we go here to Channel Manager, from what you're describing, you already have the listing on Airbnb, right? So you had the account connected, you imported the listing, and then you have Vrbo, right? And then you go to Vrbo, and then you will create one account. It will have one account here, and then if you already have the account on Vrbo, it will be a connection. But I recommend you to export the listing from here to Vrbo, right? Do not. And even now that you're already connected to Airbnb, if you need to create a listing on Airbnb, I recommend you create from here, from Hostaway, right? So we can create from here, we can create inside Airbnb, we can create the list inside Vrbo, we can create the listing inside booking.com. So the preferred way is push the listing, export the listing from Hostaway to Vrbo, right? Just make sure that you're connected, that you're mapped, that you went through the process of they call it SSO, which is the contract, the API contract with Vrbo, and then you can export the listing. All right, and also same thing applies to you, right? So if you need assistance, please go over the additional assistance, so that I can have someone to assist you with that. Okay, I received the feedback here. Unfortunately, it is anonymous, so I cannot. Uh, I cannot thank you, personally. Okay, we have done everything suggested in the webinar and it's still slacking Vrbo traffic, right? Booking.com is high, Airbnb is mid, but Vrbo is lacking. We only have one listing, and I have another portfolio in Nashville where the changes, Vrbo optimizations made a huge difference in this listing. In this listing, nothing. Okay, so first of all, thank for the feedback. And like I said, right, it depends on the market that you're at. Some channels might be stronger or might be investing, in a stronger way. It could be related to the type of listing. It could be about the priority of the channels, right, on investing more in advertising. Why am I saying that? For example, Booking.com is one of the biggest advertisers in the world, right? So if they change their strategy, yes, they will perform better, right? And some markets, that last year they were not performing that well, this year they are. So it's not only about optimization, right? Optimization, when we are talking about optimization, like the things that we are talking about here, are the things that are under your control, right? Some of the things are not. Some of the things, like when we are talking about direct, it could be the marketing that you do, in addition to everything else, right? Like promoting on social media, some other things. If it is about the channel, we can only go so far. And of course, we can use promotions, we can use some other things that they offer, but there is only so much that we can do, from our side. So that's why we focus so much in optimization. Appreciate the feedback. And but it's there is no recipe, right, that we can give that it will work for any market, any type of listings, right? And by the way, every time we talk about optimization, this was discussed with the channels, right? So it's not something that we decided, that okay, we believe it is this way. No, this is something that we discuss, right? So one of my attributions here, at Hostaway is to discuss with the channels, okay, what can we do to improve the sales of our clients, right? So this these items here, they came from the channels, right? These are suggestions from Vrbo. If I'm talking about Airbnb, you see suggestions from Airbnb, and you see that some of them overlap, right? Like instant booking, for example, flexible cancellation policies. You see that many of them, there is an overlap, right? Some of them a little more specific, a little different, but in general, they're pretty similar, right? But it's coming from the channel, itself. All right. Okay. Uh, how do I get a guest searching on Vrbo to automatically sign our agreement when they book? Okay. It takes a couple of steps here, but again, right? So if you need assistance, I believe it would be the best way, right? Because I can just give you the quick answer, right? So if on the listing level, right? So you can come here to the listing and then you can select one and then you can activate the guest portal and then you activate online check-in form and then you activate your rental agreement, right? So once you activate the rental agreement, if you create a new reservation, it will generate a new link, right? That it can be sent to the guest. And how is that link sent? It is sent by an automation. So it could be as soon, thanks for booking with us, right? It could be, for example, on this one, you can add the link here. You see, this is the link, guest portal URL, right? And it will be dynamically created. So every new reservation will generate one, right? So, and it can be sent to Vrbo as well, right? To Vrbo clients as well, right? So then all you have to do is if you need to modify that, if you need to select where to find, it would be here on rental agreement, right? I'm sorry, that was guest portal, right? You were talking about rental agreement. This would be the link, right? Rental agreement link, right? So you select that, and that variable will fetch the rental agreement link, and with that, it will send to the guest automatically, right? Of course, that's a very summarized way of explaining that, just because, we are talking about Vrbo. I don't want to get too much off topic. And it's about the flow, right? There is an entire timeline that you have to be sure, because then once you put the rental agreement, I also recommend you to only share the check-in instructions if the rental agreement is signed. So there is a way to enforce that. Again, if you need assistance to set this up, I'm sharing again the link just in case, some of you join us later, right? So that you can have here, right? And request additional assist so someone can join you, and verify your setup and the entire process, right? If the logic is accurate. So, and going back to your question, uh, how do we get guests searching on Vrbo to automatically sign our agreement when they book? Yeah, after they book, right? So it will not be displayed on Vrbo side, right? But after they book, yes, you can send it. Okay, Antonio is sending a follow-up question here. After importing from Airbnb, okay, we're talking about listings here, right? After importing from Airbnb and before exporting to Vrbo, should I add the amenities or I can add them after I connect it to Vrbo? Both, right? Because the 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 update of a Vrbo listing, you know, is a continuous update, right? So if you don't want to waste time and want to get the process started on creating the new listing right away, you can just import the listing and export the listing to Vrbo, and then you modify things and review your listings, right? So yeah, it will work either way, right? So it will work if you review, you know, before you start. I don't know how many listings we are talking about, right? So if you have only one listing, I recommend you review right away and push. But maybe you have many listings, and I would create a process. Okay, I will export everything, and then I will review listing by listing, and go over that. Because remember, right? So if you have many listings, we always have the option of bulk editing, right? So we can select here the amenity, right? And then export the amenity for another listing, right? So let's say you check for air conditioning or something here, right? You can do it by tag, or you can do it, by listing name, or you can select all, and then you can push this information to the other listings. So, right, if you have many listings, you can review one very well, and if they are similar, you can push the amenities to the other ones, right? That's another thing that you can do in a quick way. Ashley is asking, thanks for the question. Ashley is asking if there are any fields, that should be managed from Vrbo website, or everything should be managed from Hostaway. You should manage everything from Hostaway, right? And the reason for that is when you have a channel manager, PMS channel manager, right? In our case, we have both solutions in a single spot, right? Because PMS is managing the content, right, of your listings, and channel manager promoting them in different channels. So what happens is the channel expects that any information from Hostaway can overwrite the information that you put on the channel, right? So best practice, and I'm not talking in this case specifically, not even talking about only Vrbo, right? Airbnb would be the same thing, right? So every software, any channel that has an API, very advanced that allows, modification and updates. If you modify, for example, the rates, on the website, if you modify it here again, it will overwrite whatever you did on the channel, right? So rule of thumb is yes, do it always here, unless it is an exception, right? Like booking, for example, that once you get integrated, you cannot export more information, yeah, and keep updating, right? It's only at the moment that you create a listing, right? But if we're talking about Vrbo and Airbnb, I recommend you do everything here from Hostaway. And keep in mind, we are usually the first ones to integrate all the features that become available for software to use, right? So it could be that there is a functionality that you see on the channel that is not available here, but it's probably because it was not made available yet to be done through the software, right? Only directly on the platform. Sometimes it happens, there is a delay. They first release on their platform, that you can do it manually, and then they release after some time to the software, software companies like ours, so that we can implement that and offer to our clients. Thanks. Yes, Pascal, thanks for the question. Is being Premier Host on Vrbo increase your views and bookings similar to Superhost at Airbnb? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Right? Yeah, you get a boost, yeah, on your ranking, on being displayed, because again, this is a rule that every time you perform better than other listings, it is an upward spiral, right? Because you keep converting more, right? And you keep converting more because you keep being displayed more often, right? So yeah, any channel, like any OTA, will give you preference on that, right? And if you're a super host, it means that a premier host, it means that you don't cancel reservations very often. Or, oh, by the way, that's something that I just remember here, that I left here. Just, I don't want to forget. If you have to cancel, right? I don't recommend canceling reservations because, it gives a bad experience to the guest, and then it becomes more difficult to get the premier host, right? There is just a certain amount of cancellations that you can have. But if you need to cancel a Vrbo reservation, make sure that you select one of the options that the traveler requested, right? So that you don't get penalized in fees or in any other way, like score, to become a superhost, right? So if the traveler requests the cancellation, we have the option to select from here, which case, applied, right? Because if it is the traveler, then that does not apply, right? So again, to become a premier host, you need a number of reviews, a number of cancellations, having a communication, very quick communication with the guests. In that case, I recommend you use our automations, to make sure that you don't miss anything. Uh, and yes, you will be ranked higher. Thanks for the question. Stephen is asking if the cancellation policy will push your listing more upfront. It's not the case of being pushed more. Indirectly, yes, because you will convert more, right? So the more you convert, the more times the OTA shows your listing and your listing gets a booking, that's a conversion, right? So you're converting more, right? So if your cancellation policy is less restrictive, right? So chances are that you're going to get more bookings on that sense, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to be ranked separately, but depending on the filters that the guest is looking for, they might even look, for this type of cancellation, right? A more flexible one. And I can tell by myself, right? I never book a non-refundable reservation, for example, if I have to book a hotel, for example, right? But this is, I'm giving a personal example, but you see that there are many, many guests, that will avoid, even with a discount. You can offer a discount, right? Of course, it's part of the business, the revenue management planning, but and if you have more than one listing, you can test with one listing, right? Everything that I'm telling you about, if you're not sure, how it will perform in your market, and you have more than one listing, do the test, run with one listing and see, what works best for you, right? And if it's working. How, okay. Daniel is asking here, how can I turn off a hold? Let me see. Again, this is a test account. Let me see if I can find here. If I go to and always pay attention, right, to host quality here, to see the reviews and see anything that might be impacting your reviews. But let me go to guest payment here. So you can filter type and status, right? So hold success or awaiting hold, apply. I don't have any. I'm sorry, this is a test account. I don't think I have anything recent, but you would see it is scheduled, and then you can cancel what's being scheduled, right? Let me see if I can find it. No, I don't have any situation, right? But when you open a reservation, how it works is I had the reservation open here. Okay, don't have any more. But if you have a reservation, right, and then I take could be this one here. So you see on the payment section, you see if the payment went through, if it is scheduled, and you see the same thing about the payment and the pre-authorization, right? It's going to show as scheduled, right? So if you have a hold and you want to cancel the hold, you'll be able to cancel it from here. You click on the three dots and it will cancel, the same way that it works with the charges. It works with the authorization, right? In case you want to cancel. Okay, Tabitha is saying that she doesn't have the gas payment. The reason for that, Tabitha, could be that when someone created your user, you were not given access, to manage payments, for example, right? It could be that, right? So ask whoever created your profile, right, to review that, right? Because yeah, every account has a gas payment, right? So it could be that could be the reason why. All right. So we're past time, but okay. One last question here. James is asking, do you have any best practices for proven strategies as far as partial payment charges, pay X amount now, X amount later, to entice more bookings? There is no formula. Again, James, it will depend on how competitive your market is. I would test. How are you? Especially if I have more listings to test. Another way that you can do is, and I always recommend to do that, right, is to go to the channel Vrbo, for example, and look for your area and see how your competitors are offering, right? So to be more competitive than them, you should offer a better way of doing that. And it also depends on your cash flow, and how you want to plan your cash flow, right? Uh, I have some clients that are afraid of having to refund the gas in the future. They rather charge, closer to the check-in. I have clients that are on the other on the other side of things, that no, I want all the money now, and I want to make sure that I hold the money, until the check-in, right? So no, there is no formula for that, right? I'm only bringing to your attention just for the same reason that you brought the question, right? So that you can think about it, right? Think if you're not being too strict, maybe being too flexible, right? Because if all your competitors are doing in a different way, maybe you can be, in a different way, right? Or maybe that's your secret sauce. There is no way to find out, right? So each market will work in a different way, and each listing tier will have a different competition around, right? So no formula for that, unfortunately, right? Or not unfortunately, right? So this is not a it's not a scientific mathematical thing, because there are many factors in place, right? So when we work with the short-term rental, sometimes even the photos can tell more than anything else. So yeah, there is a lot of subjectivity on the reason why the guest is booking, and some of them could be tested, right? If you can test, then it becomes more scientific. Well, Thanks for thank you for all the questions and all the engagement. I appreciate you taking the time, and spending with me. So tomorrow you can expect the link, to watch the webinar. And also I will share an article, that I have most of the items, that we discuss here, so that you can have as a reference to review later on. All right. Thank you very much for spending that time with me. I see you next week. Or maybe the other week, right? Next week we have Hostella or a user uh, gathering. So I don't think we'll be able to have another one this next week, but the other week, yes, for sure. I'm looking forward to it. All right. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye bye.